It was a big Xbox day today. A lot of Xbox stuff.
Yeah.
Put the video out on Unbox Therapy with these guys over here. You know, Xbox Series X. Well, don't get carried away. You can't slide a disc into that drive. You can't boot this one up just yet. These are placeholders for the time being. It's an early preview to the people out there. I did a little size comparison. You can go check out the video for yourself. But of course, I gotta have them on this set as well, just to, spruce up. Hey, man.
Yeah.
I was gonna say spruce up the place.
No.
The stunt is what's more extreme, stunting or flexing? It's which one is more? You've taken it further.
I feel like flexing is more of like the riches. It's the cash.
Okay.
Stunting is more of like the posing. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Willie Do. He's just Willie Do's breaking it down. He's keeping us in line. Maybe we should do a quick definition here.
Okay,
Stuntin, Urban Dictionary. That's where we have to go for this type of thing. We'll see if Willie Do's on point or not. We're gonna check him up. Stuntin, high class flashing of your jewelry, money, riches.
Oh, so is it the opposite?
Made famous by the cash money millionaires. A person who stunts would be a stunner, usually showing off diamonds, gold, platinum, women, cars, and stacks of cash. Large bills. See bling bling. So I think it's the same thing, actually. Let's see. What did I say it was?
Flexing.
Flex. I think flexing is identical. Yeah, showing off, fronting. Okay, let's look up fronting. Acting like you are more or you have more than what really exists. Oh, interesting. See where this thing goes. I think I'm stunting. I have them here. I mean, it's not like it makes me rich or if it's a diamond or something, but in the tech world, I would say that's stunting to have that right now. So you were on point regardless, man. We're just having fun with the lingo here today. Either way, flexing, stunting, it's stunting. You know what I mean? You don't put the G at the end.
Yeah.
I actually like pronouncing it fully though. Stunting. But even with an English accent. Yeah. Anyway, so we examine these things, and it got me thinking because it's really, yes, I'm excited about the hardware. Yes, I'm excited about the next gen. Of course, I'm excited at high frame rates. That's all cool stuff. I'm really interested in the gaming business, and I'm really interested in the potential for this Xbox All Access thing. They're going to do this All Access thing seems like a bit of a deal. I got this article here from Joanna Nelius. Figured it out. Month on this over here, the Series S, or $35 per month over here for the Series X.
Financing.
Everything. Financing, subscription, everything all in that fee. No upfront. Both plans then include Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. And what Ultimate does is it gives you access to Xbox games on PC, Android, and, Android via Project xCloud. It also includes Xbox Live Gold and EA Play subscriptions at no additional cost. Individually, both subscriptions cost $15 and $5 per month, respectively, or $30 annually for EA Play. So it's all bundled in there, plus you're paying off the console in monthly installments, which is the obviously that's why the price correlates with the more expensive unit. That's why you go up $10 per month to get this one. It's not just about the games that you're playing that's unlocking that for you. So that's a lot of value for your money and a lack of upfront apprehension, because now it's just like, well, $25 a month. I mean, what are you paying for Netflix these days?
Yeah, you don't even buy it. You can't buy a game.
I saw people are canceling their Netflix anyway.
Yeah.
You can just take that money and
there you go.
I'm goofing, Will. So the monthly payments plus the Game Pass Ultimate and EA Play subscriptions make it seem like a steal. You end up paying slightly less than the MSRP on either because you subsidize the cost. Now, I know it's not going to be for everyone. Some people are against the idea of financing. They're saying, if I don't have the money today, I don't want to be stretching out on that. I don't want to be going above the mean, and then I can't afford it later on for whatever reason. So I understand it's not going to be for everyone, but it's an interesting new way of interacting with your gaming. And it's a position where maybe Microsoft has a slight advantage over Sony, which of course they're going to get compared to. And the other one that they would likely get compared to would be Nintendo. And especially when you now have the Series S at the exact same price as the Nintendo Switch at $299. So here you have Willie Doo showing off right now the different options for you listed on Microsoft's website. All the financing and everything happens right on here. You have $34.99 for 24 months, no upfront cost on the Series X, $24.99 for 24 months, no upfront cost for the smallest Xbox ever, the Series S. And then you have, actually, they're still selling the One S. I don't know who would get this right now. That seems pretty wild. I think you can wait. Pre-order September 22nd. I think you should definitely wait for at least the Series S at this point, as opposed to going for the previous generation. But anyway, I bring up the $299 thing, Will, because Nintendo is actually set to boost Switch production ahead of the holiday season. Gaming, gaming, gaming. It's all about gaming. People are trapped at home, and people have rekindled their relationship with their various game devices. They rekindle it, whether it's going to be Xbox, Sony, or Nintendo with the wildly popular Switch. Nintendo is telling partners to boost production to as many as 30 million consoles this year, and they're trying to ramp up for this holiday season where they think there's going to be a really high demand, and they want to be
for the Nintendo Switch.
The Nintendo Switch, the standard version, $299. They also sell the Lite version, Will, which is $199. So coming in below either of these, and certainly below whatever Sony's going to let you get. Nintendo's telling manufacturing partners to boost production to 30 million consoles. The official forecast coming from the company was 19 million. Last month, Nintendo reported a 428% surge in profit during the most recent quarter, aided in part by the strength of the Animal Crossing New Horizons video game.
Yeah, you can't get that on Xbox or PlayStation.
You ever heard of this game?
Of course.
I don't play it. You're not involved, but you heard of it.
Big.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
I see it on social media. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
What is the concept of Animal Crossing?
You're asking me?
Yes.
You're just building stuff, right? Collecting, building, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems to be a good fit for lockdown because it's one of those kind of
Very chill,
but also like you're constantly improving upon. There's no end. It's not linear.
And seasons change, more opportunities for different things.
Like I saw people were growing and selling crops, and it's the kind of thing where you can dip in and dip out, and you stay connected to it for a long period of time. The company sold more than 3 million Switch units and 2.6 million units of Switch Lite, as well as 10.6 million copies of Animal Crossing New Horizons. I remember when the game launched and the lockdown was first starting and people were still lined up over at the GameStop. They wanted to get that hot new Animal Crossing. People were fired right up about it. In the period ending June 30th, Nintendo's profits rose to 1.37 billion, more than twice the 71 billion yen that they were expecting. So, by the way, you got to do the conversion on that. 144 billion yen is 1.37 billion. Therefore, 71 billion yen is like, I don't know, 700 million, something like this. I'm just doing some yen conversions real quick.
Yeah, I'm sure it's right.
Anyway, so they expect things to be big. Nintendo wants to be ready. You have your option. I'm looking at you, audience. You get to choose this holiday season between an Xbox Series S at $299 or a Nintendo Switch at $299, what do? Is it going to be Animal Crossing or is it going to be I'll wait a while for Halo one day? You got Game Pass, you get a lot of games. Relax. Speaking of gaming, Apple is going to be preventing users from signing into Epic Games after September 11th. September 11th. That's soon, really, dude. Is that tomorrow at this point that we're filming this? So that's today at the point that you're watching this, likely. Epic is telling people, go onto your account, change your email address associated with your account right now, or you will lose it. They're warning you. Because I guess there was some sort of collaboration there where you could use your Apple ID as your sign-in for Epic Games. And if, obviously, when that gets removed, you would need to somehow remap it. Now, Epic is saying maybe there's a chance you could do it, but the best thing to do right now is to go change. This is a public service announcement. You got the skins, and I don't know.
Damn, that's
you're
good.
in the Epic game. You're on Fortnite. You paid for the skins, man. You were trying to save it, so you got to get your login sorted out.
Like
Shit cool as hell.
They change your email.
Man, people are going to be sending emails to Epic. They're going to be sending emails to Apple. They're going to be saying, look, I got nothing to do with your beef. Where's my stuff, and how do I get it? And maybe it has more to do with Epic, I guess, because there should be some sort of a way for them to figure out those previous accounts and whatever criteria was associated with it.
They probably just have.
How's it going?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Probably a mass email. The battle between Apple and Fortnite creating Epic Games continues to escalate as users will no longer be able to sign into their account and sign with Apple after September 11th. Users will be able to access their Epic Games account only if they change their email address before the deadline. If they delay, they may lose access completely, although Epic says it may be able to recover the account manually. I know that's the idea.
I contacted you guys on Monday.
And
they
my Apple ID
they said, no, actually, I contacted you guys last Thursday or Friday. They said somebody would come out just Tuesday
doing the thing
to check it out.
on your own. If you hope to
everything's
save your
busy. COVID
progress,
has everything
skins,
backed
whatever,
up, supplies,
else you got
jobs,
going on
everything.
in
So I
Epic
get
Games
it.
account where you use
So
Apple
whenever you
Sign
guys
In, of
have
course, you
some
will need
free
another
time, I'll send
device
somebody
to
out here
play
to give me a good
to be
estimate.
clear.
Like I said, I should be around this evening or all day tomorrow.
Account. They're still kind of messed up on iOS. Apparently,
Did it have to be in the
Samsung
evening again?
is
I get off
making
work around
over
4 o'clock.
55% in profit for
I'm normally
every
home around
Galaxy Note
4:30.
20 Ultra that they sell. I don't know if that exceeds your expectations, if that's where you expect it to be. It's important to note before we dive deeply into this at all.
I'll be home all day tomorrow.
When you're talking about profit, yes, you can look up the list of components inside of a device and try to figure out, okay, here was their cost per unit, but that's not the way the manufacturer looks at it. They think about cost differently, or they do care about that cost as well and being profitable on a per unit basis if possible. But they've also got marketing costs, office space, and energy. I mean, there's like other costs that they would probably.
If you're not familiar with the area, just stay on Franklin. Sometimes people GPS it and it'll send them to the street behind me on Ridge Street.
Samsung's just sitting on all this money. It's like, well, then they spend it in this variety of ways to make you want to buy the thing in the first place. There's a lot of expenses.
Hey, you're supposed to come look at my fence on Tuesday. It's fucking Friday. And you're telling me you'll be here tomorrow.
Did an investigation, tried to figure out all the various components that are inside of the Note 20 Ultra. I suppose the Note 20 Ultra is interesting because it is this really expensive device. If we're being honest here, you can see that the biggest expenditure inside of this device is from Qualcomm. Of course, it's related to the X55 5G modem and RF antenna system. I'm Andy, and I'm a contractor. When it comes to my business, I trust Nextenture.
Turn off your engine! Today I'm going to show you how the other half lives, or in this case, drives. This is the LS500, a true luxury sedan. That's what the LS stands for. As we walk around, you can see it's conservative in its color, but nice bits of chrome. Cool dual exhaust system. This particular edition here, being a loaded edition, it actually cost more than I just sold my mother's house for in Niagara Falls. And this doesn't even have a bathroom in it. Now, I personally like this version because it's classic. It's classic rear-wheel drive. You can get it an all-wheel drive, too. The rear-wheel drive ones are a little bit quicker. And, of course, they get a little bit better gas mileage. But they all are just steeped in luxury, as you're going to see inside. As you climb inside, it's understated. This one's the black leather, my favorite. Oodles of room in the back seat. No crowded back seat in this luxury sedan. And yet it has things you'd never think of in a car. Watch this. We'll push the seat button. There's the seat. Then we go up to the main control. And what do? We go down to driver's seat refresh. There we go. And it turns your chair into a massage parlor. Let's try upper body. We'll turn it on. And what happens? The seat, well, not this seat. The seat I'm in is now massaging my back. And you can run this while you're driving the car. Check it out. It's massaging my back. It's doing a traditional Japanese shiatsu massage on me. And as you can see, there's various settings you can do. No more getting a sore neck or back because you're driving too far. Now perhaps it's overkill because these seats are so comfortable anyway, but there's no such thing as overkill in a car like this. It's quiet, and quieter than you might think. It has active noise cancellation technology. So when you're driving down the road, not only do you have a silent car, but it's perfectly set up with insulation and noise canceling sound that you can have conversations with the people in the back seat without having to raise your voice. Hey, you're driving this thing around long distances, you might come out feeling better than you did before the trip. Instead of saying, oh, my neck, my back, this thing's massaging you while you drive down the road. And of course, it's got various settings. You know me, I wouldn't put it on the sport. So you go a little bit zippier, a little bit worse gas mileage, but it's more fun this way. And I also like the idea that you can buy what you want. This is a rear-wheel drive, classic, that's what I'd like. But for you in the snow belt, go skiing all the time, drive in rainy areas, you can buy an all-wheel drive version. It's your choice. You are not forced to buy a vehicle that only comes in all-wheel drive, like many other manufacturers have. Now, as you can see, this luxury sedan is still made in Japan. All these LSs have been made in Japan from the very beginning. This is the quality when you close the door. One solid car. And yes, it's heavy. It weighs over 2.5 tons. That's what helps give it a really good ride. Solid drivability. You don't buy these things for gas mileage. This thing gets 19 in the city, 26 on the highway if you're lucky. This one's just a few C-notes below $100,000 for a new car. You pay that kind of money? Who cares about stinking gas mileage? Like my father used to say with his big block Chevy V8 engines, I run a gas station. I got thousands of gallons of fuel under the ground here. What do I care about gas mileage? And of course, it's like driving around in a magic carpet ride. It's so smooth. It's got all kinds of electronic.
The 2020 Lexus LS 500 or 400, whatever the fuck that shit was.
This is Andy, owner of Andy Man Services.
Last month, I insured my business with nexinsurance.com.
Super.
What up, though? Good. So we about to start the underpainting for this piece right here. Yeah, I can make you whatever after I get my deposit. Bonjour. All the way from France. What's up, man? Hollering at you from across the pond. But yeah, Reaper, if you want a piece of art done, I can paint stuff for you. Let you know my shit ain't cheap and I need a deposit up front. You're gonna have to give me money up front. But I'll paint anything you want for the right price. I don't do nothing for less than $400. So anything you want, you're gonna give me at least $400. But on average, like an average painting from me is about $700-800 on average. And then you got to pay for your shipping too. Shit. Damn. Go to my Instagram at Paintings by the Prince and send me a message on Instagram and I'll send you my price list. Cause we strong as shit. And it's so dank that shit won't stay fucking lit. Like, yeah. I've been doing so many commissions this year, yo. I can't even. Man, this painting back there on the floor and this painting right here, mine started them shits like in January, February. And those are like my own paintings. That one and the one back there. But I've had so many commissions this year, I ain't even been able to finish them shits. I just been doing commission after commission after commission after commission. I feel lucky as shit, yo. I made a lot of money this year selling commissions. So what the fuck is that? Oh, deodorant. Damn, I got a lot of deodorant on my shit. Do I still have any deodorant on? God damn, that shit all over my damn shirt. I done rubbed all my deodorant off. Ah, fuck. But yeah, I've been fortunate as hell to sell like an ass of fucking commissions this year, and I sold like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I sold 6 original pieces this year, and I sold 6 original pieces. I done did like 6 or 7 fucking commissions, and it's like, yo, I've been busy. But I do want to have more time to finish some more of my own projects, so when I have my next show, I can have new art to show. Like, I'm making a lot of art, but I can't keep this shit. That shit going some way, that shit going some way. I create all this art, and I ain't got nothing to show except a paycheck, which is good. Oh my God. You know what, Doobie? I'm done with you. Screw you. Alright. But yeah, I feel fortunate as shit, yo. Sold an ass of art this year, and the year ain't even over yet. So my most expensive piece of art this year, after fucking 11 years of creating art, and like in the past 4 years, the last shit I've been doing for the past 4 years, I put a big price tag on it because I feel like my work is important. I feel like I have imbued my art with important concepts that were transcribed through my creative process, and I feel like that shit holds significant value, culturally, intellectually, and monetary. And so my art, like my shit, it's cheap compared to like other career artists, but it ain't cheap compared to like the average person. And after my accomplishment this year, I think all my new art is gonna be even more expensive, yo. I really do see me like adding another, taxing on another $5 grand to a piece. So now my shit gonna go from 8,000 to 13,000. See how people like that shit. See how that shit work out. You know? But for my commission work, I still try to keep my commissions cheap enough so that as many people as possible can afford my artwork. So if you got a couple $100, you can still own an original piece from me. If you want one of my ideas, that's where the money come in at. I can do a painting for you for $800. But if you want one of my paintings, it's $8,000. And then I'm thinking too, like, for the past 4 or 5 years, I've had my base rate at $400. I think this is the last year for it. So if you really, really want to paint it, man, get one now, for real. If you're for real about that shit, because next year I'm gonna have to up my rate a little bit more, yo. Because like I say, I've done so many commissions that it's literally taken away time for me to work on my own creative process because I'm working for other people. So if people still want me to continue to work for them and produce art for them, it's gonna have to, because I really need to work on my own shit. But time will tell. Just don't forget Sunday. This Sunday is the big event. Come on, don't fall over.
It's not like he wants to kill. He just doesn't want to die. You know what I'm saying? It's that situation. We are living in a war zone. I feel like I can represent my generation so much because I honestly did not care what I was. But now, I cannot die. I can't leave until this one straight. You know, I'm not suicidal. I can't go until y'all already know what time it is. And then after that, boom, it's all over. And we can see, you know, how to move on. But that's all it is.
So you're gonna try to fill this in real quick.
God has me to see what life should be like.
Alright, bro. Just got a phone call from a friend. So finally finished this commission. Worked on this thing for about I want to say like a little over a month, almost 2 months it took me to get this thing done. But it's done and it looks nice. I'm happy and the client is happy. I really enjoyed working on this piece. Thought I'd delete that shit. How is it still up there? Just trying to share this piece a little bit more before we get started with some part. What up, though? I wish this one was bigger. Follow Pennsylvania. No, what is it? The State Museum of Pennsylvania. Cause Sunday they're gonna have their award ceremony at 2 p.m. Do not miss it. All right. Did my little social media thing real quick. Put this back so it can dry. It's gonna have to dry for about a week or so. Then I can varnish it. Then it'll dry for a day or so with the varnish on it. And then it'll be ready. Boy.
I'm Andy, and I'm a contractor. When it comes to my business, I trust Next Insurance. Everything is done 100% online. Business insurance, it can be pricey. But Next Insurance, they got great prices. If anything happens, I can file a claim instantly online. My business needs me, so I need insurance that saves me time.
Get your business insured instantly online with Next Insurance. What?
Without pausing your music. Join free for a month and listen uninterrupted.
No, thank you. I just said I had this one little bar just now, yo. What happened? I said, life is sour like a pickle, so I deal with it. In these streets real cold, I just chill with it. You get it? Dill, pickle. Oh my God, that was a good little bar, yo. Life is sour like a pickle, so I deal with it. I'm too good for myself, man. Too good for myself. So I chill with it. Oh, like a pickle, so I deal with it. Streets is cold, yeah. So I chill with it. Like a pickle, deal with it. Oh, streets is cold, deal with it. So I deal with it. So I deal with it. Bam 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 bam. Bam 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 bam. Hey hey hey.
If you don't fuck with us, well then.
Get this out, bitch ass.
Well then.
From plan to reality, Monday.com got you covered. Stay on track with daily logs and manage your construction.
Wow, I really did that? You son of a bitch. I flicked my wrist too hard. Yeah. Certified hood classic. Man, I was born a bastard, but I still got a shit master. That's why they trap. Certified hood. And that's why they got a trap. For the niggas that Certified hood classic, yeah. Certified hood classic. Ooh, yeah. Certified hood classic. Hey, hey, bum 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 da 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 da. Hey, hey, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Without cutting to an ad, start a trial of YouTube Premium on us and cook uninterrupted.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, hey, hey. Oh yeah, oh yeah, hey, hey. Oh yeah, oh yeah, hey, 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 hey. Oh yeah, oh yeah.
You're into something new, and you want to get good at it, like really good at it. YouTube Premium can help with that. You can study back to back to back without ads. You can download videos so you can keep learning, even when you don't have Wi-Fi or data. And you can keep listening with your screen locked. Upgrade to YouTube Premium. Sign up today.
Thank you.
Pasta without cutting to an ad. Start a trial of YouTube Premium on us and cook uninterrupted.
This is Andy, owner of Andy Man Services.
Last month, I insured my business through nexinsurance.com. Super easy, tailored, and affordable.
Andy Man.
In California, how are you? You're on with Jen and Matt.
Hey, hello, Matt.
Hi.
Hi. I have a question. Like, how come you guys believe in world history and you don't believe in biblical history?
Because I believe in whatever world history actually is supported by the best available evidence, and biblical history isn't that. The Bible's not a history book, even though it includes historical claims. It'd be like me saying... It would be like me writing an autobiography that says, hey, I was born in 1969, I graduated high school in 1987, I saw an alien spacecraft in 1989, I can raise the dead, men are inferior to women, don't eat shrimp. That's not a history of me, just because a couple of things in there are accurate.
Okay, but in history books, we see things that we don't know of. I mean, that we have no proof of. But
like what? I don't count the Bible as a history book.
Do you think that we find history books and then go back and try to verify everything that we find in them?
No, but because sometimes there's proof.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Has the Bible got proof for the things that I reject? Because I haven't seen it.
Well, the Tower of David and...
The Tower of David? Hang on, the Tower of David? What Tower of David? I'm not familiar with that story.
Wait, Tower of Babel, I'm sorry.
Oh, the Tower of Babel. You mean that obviously fictional story that could not possibly be true? That at one point in time, the entire earth was of one language, and they all got together and said, hey, let's never leave each other, let's build a city with a tower in it, and then God supposedly came down and confounded their language? That obviously bullshit story, you want to put that up as if it's history? What's the evidence for it?
Oh, it's in the Bible.
Yeah, I don't give a shit.
Why should we believe the Bible?
Because that's history.
No,
but
it's
it says
not.
who? Hold on, it says who?
Go ahead.
What?
Like, if I were to find a history book on a table, I just find a history book, does that mean that everything in that book is true? Because I said it's history.
Yeah, but
Why would you just accept anything that I have to say?
I don't know. I'm just saying because everything I learned in school, like every kid is taught in elementary school, and then it's up to them to verify if it's true.
Right.
Well, actually, in elementary school, we should not be teaching that the Bible is true or a history book. That's actually against the law.
I didn't hear that you said that they were teaching the Bible. I heard that they were teaching you that they give you information and they're teaching you to verify that this information is true before you believe it, right? So you've gone through and verified everything in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
So you've been to Babel?
Not really.
Not really.
Not really. Yeah, I know that because it didn't exist.
No, those are kind of like metaphoric.
I was one of those.
You know what history books don't tend to contain? Metaphor, simile, dragons, moral instructions. Those things aren't part of history books. History books tell you about history.
That's why, yeah, the book of Revelation is like an acid trip.
Yes.
And that's proof that it's a history book?
Actually, that's a future book, but...
Right.
But still, there's things in the Bible that are true.
Yes, there are.
There are also things in Harry Potter that are true.
That list of 6 things I read to you, 2 of them were true. But that doesn't tell you whether the other 4 were. Do you think I can raise the dead?
Maybe.
Really?
No.
Okay.
Do you really believe that? No, like, but that's the thing is we're not playing games. Like, we're being serious. We really don't believe it.
I know that. But, okay.
And we don't know why you do.
No, I don't believe it.
Do you like
don't believe the Bible? You don't believe the Bible?
Wait. Oh, yes, I do. I mean,
okay.
I do, but like I say, a lot of it are metaphors.
How am I supposed to know which one's a metaphor or not?
Because it's common sense.
I don't believe that. Because I don't do very well with common sense.
You started this conversation by claiming that the Tower of Babel was real and historical, and then when I pointed out that that was ridiculous, then you wanted to claim it's metaphor. So if it's a metaphor, how did we actually get different languages?
Because, well, my wife goes to my wife studies the Bible a lot, and she's told me that God, like, as a punishment for all the people, he gave us like a curse so everybody would understand each other.
Why should anybody believe your wife?
Because it's not her words. Those words are in the Bible.
No,
do you believe in curses? Do you believe in curses?
Curses?
Curses.
No, now I don't.
So why would you believe that?
Why wasn't telling you the truth?
I know that back in the Bible days, everything was different.
So you think that curses used to exist, but now they don't?
I know that there's stories of witches, and I don't know about that either.
How do we find out?
But, huh?
How do we find out?
Well, yeah.
Hello?
Yeah is not an answer to Jenna's question. Jenna's asking you, how would you go about finding out the truth?
And how do we find out if there actually used to be witches? Like, so in the old days, they actually did believe in witches, and they actually killed people because they believed that they were, actually, this is a fascinating, I mean, it's actually went on a long time, but how do we know if they were or were not witches?
And specifically, Jenna's asking, how could we tell if they had some sort of magical powers? Because we understand there are people who identify and label themselves witches right now. But if the purpose is to identify a witch who has powers,
Right, I mean, like that has a voodoo doll that can actually manipulate physics and do magic.
yeah, how would we demonstrate that?
I have no clue.
Yeah. Maybe you should stop believing things that you don't have a clue in how you could possibly test. Maybe you should just say, until such time as there's actual good evidence for it, I won't believe that.
Okay, then I guess you got me again.
Okay.
Okay, then. All right, Matt.
Thanks, Guillermo.
Thanks. That was fun.
Good evening and welcome to the God Debate. My name is Malcolm Thaler, and together with Joseph Stanfield, Arnab Dutt, Mike Ray, and the Dean's Fellows, we have organized the debate that you're about to see. Now, whether you are here tonight to hear an exchange of views, an enlightening discussion, or just a good show, I know you're not here to hear a long speech from undergraduates, so I will keep this short. First, allow me to recognize those in the Notre Dame community who made this debate possible. The God Debate 2 was sponsored by the Institute for Scholarship in the Liberal Arts and the Henkel's Lecture Series, with additional generous support by the College of Arts and Letters, the College of Science, and the College of Business, Campus Ministry, the Classics Department, the History Department, the Program of Liberal Studies, and Chemistry, the Center for Civil and Human Rights, ILS, and the Department of German and Russian, the Center for Philosophy of Religion, the Center for Undergraduate Scholarly Engagement, the Rooney Center for American Democracy, the Glynn Family Honors Program, and Learning Beyond the Classroom. Finally, I would just like to read a quick passage that beautifully sums up the reason why we are here tonight. Kenneth Burke writes this in the Philosophy of Literary Form. Imagine that you enter a parlor. You come late. When you arrive, others have long preceded you, and they are engaged in a heated discussion, a discussion too heated for them to pause and tell you exactly what it is about. In fact, the discussion had already begun long before any of them got there, so that no one present is qualified to retrace for you all the steps that had gone before. You listen for a while until you decide that you have caught the tenor of the argument, and then you put in your order. Someone answers, you answer him. Another comes to your defense. Another aligns himself against you, to either the embarrassment or gratification of your opponent, depending on the quality of your ally's assistance. However, the discussion is interminable. The hour grows late, and you must depart. And you do depart, with the discussion still vigorously in progress. So now, please join me in welcoming two more to our discussion. Sam Harris and William Lane Craig. And please welcome our moderator, Professor Mike Ray from the Center for Philosophy of Religion.
Thanks, Malcolm. Welcome to the second installment of the God Debate. My name is Michael Ray. I'm a professor of philosophy here at the University of Notre Dame and the director of the Center for Philosophy of Religion, one of the sponsors of tonight's event. The Center for Philosophy of Religion was founded in the late 1970s with the aim of promoting cutting-edge research on topics in the philosophy of religion and in distinctively Christian philosophy. One of our goals in sponsoring the God Debate series is to try to bring some of the very issues discussed among our research fellows to a wider, non-academic audience, and in a format that will hopefully be fun and engaging. Our show tonight, as you already know, is a debate between William Lane Craig and Sam Harris, coming together for the very first time to discuss the question, are the foundations of moral values natural or supernatural? William Lane Craig is Research Professor of Philosophy at Talbot School of Theology in La Mirada, California. He is best known among philosophers for his extensive and influential work in the philosophy of time and the philosophy of religion. He is known to the wider public as someone who is able to articulate and defend the doctrines of the Christian faith in a way that is highly accessible, but also philosophically and theologically rigorous. He became a Christian at the age of 16, pursued undergraduate studies at Wheaton College, and holds 2 earned doctorates, one in philosophy from the University of Birmingham and one in theology from the University of Munich. He has authored or edited over 30 books, as well as over 100 articles in professional journals of philosophy and theology. Known as one of the 4 horsemen of the New Atheist movement, Sam Harris is the author of the New York Times bestsellers The Moral Landscape, The End of Faith, and Letter to a Christian Nation. The End of Faith won the 2005 PEN Award for Nonfiction. Mr. Harris's writing has been published in over 15 languages. He and his work have been discussed in Newsweek, Time, the New York Times, Scientific American, Nature, Rolling Stone, and many other journals. His writing has appeared in Newsweek, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Economist, the Times London, the Boston Globe, the Atlantic, the Annals of Neurology, and elsewhere. Mr. Harris is a co-founder and CEO of Project Reason, a nonprofit foundation devoted to spreading scientific knowledge and secular values in society. He received a degree in philosophy from Stanford University and a PhD in neuroscience from UCLA. The structure of tonight's debate will be as follows. Each debater will take 20 minutes for his opening speech, followed by rebuttals of 12 minutes and 8 minutes respectively, and then closing speeches of 5 minutes each. At the conclusion of the debate, we will have about 30 minutes for questions from the audience. If you would like to ask a question, line up behind one of the 2 microphones in front or in the balcony. We're letting Notre Dame students ask the first 4 questions tonight, so if you are not a Notre Dame student and somehow find yourself at the front of the Q&A line, please allow a student to go ahead of you. Time will be kept strictly. There is a timekeeper in the front who can be seen by both speakers, and once each speaker's time has elapsed, he will be given at most 15 seconds to finish his final sentence before being rudely interrupted by me, the time enforcer. Because we are keeping the time strict, we ask you to hold all applause and other indications of agreement or disagreement, cheering, crowd surfing, and the like, until the very end of the debate. Please remember that flash photography, videotaping, and active cell phones are all prohibited. Finally, remember that Notre Dame is the world's #1 institution in the philosophy of religion and also has one of the world's best theology departments. Any questions you don't get to ask during the 25 or 30-minute Q&A, you can ask of your local faculty in the days and weeks to come. And now on with the show.
Well, good evening. It's wonderful to be here at the University of Notre Dame, and I want to begin by thanking... Sorry.
I need to... We're going to begin each speech with me checking with the timekeeper to make sure that he's ready, and then the timekeeper is going to hit go, and then you get to go.
All right.
So you go when I say begin.
Sorry for jumping the gun.
Professor Craig gets the first word in the debate. Dr. Harris gets the last word. Timekeeper, are you ready? This is 20 minutes. Begin.
I want to begin by thanking the Center for Philosophy of Religion for the invitation to participate in tonight's debate. The question of the correct foundation of morality is one that is not only of tremendous academic interest, but also one that has enormous practical application for our lives. Now, to begin with an important point of agreement, Dr. Harris and I agree that there are objective moral values and duties. To say that moral values and duties are objective is to say that they are valid and binding independent of human opinion. For example, to say that the Holocaust was objectively evil is to say that it was evil even though the Nazis who carried it out thought that it was good. And it would still have been evil even if the Nazis had won World War II and succeeded in brainwashing or exterminating everyone who disagreed with them so that everybody thought the Holocaust was good. One of the great merits of Dr. Harris's recent book, The Moral Landscape, is his bold affirmation of the objectivity of moral values and duties. He inveighs against what he calls the overeducated, atheistic, moral nihilists and relativists who refuse to condemn as objectively wrong terrible atrocities like the genital mutilation of little girls. He rightly declares, if only one person in the world held down a terrified, struggling, screaming little girl, cut off her genitals with a septic blade and sewed her back up, the only question would be how severely that person should be punished. What is not in question is that such a person has done something horribly, objectively wrong. The question before us this evening, then, is what is the best foundation for the existence of objective moral values and duties? What grounds them? What makes certain actions objectively good or evil, right or wrong? In tonight's debate, I'm going to defend two basic contentions. First, if God exists, then we have a sound foundation for objective moral values and duties. And second, if God does not exist, then we do not have a sound foundation for objective moral values and duties. Now notice that these are conditional claims. I shall not be arguing tonight that God exists. Maybe Dr. Harris is right, that atheism is true. That wouldn't affect the truth of my two contentions. All that would follow is that objective moral values and duties would then, contrary to Dr. Harris, not exist. So let's look at that first contention together. If God exists, then we have a sound foundation for objective moral values and duties. Here, I want to examine two subpoints with you. First, theism provides a sound foundation for objective moral values. Moral values have to do with what is good or evil. On the theistic view, objective moral values are grounded in God. As St. Anselm saw, God is by definition the greatest conceivable being, and therefore the highest good. Indeed, he is not merely perfectly good, he is the locus and paradigm of moral values. God's own holy and loving nature provides the absolute
Yo, is this motherfucker riding the shark? Yo, this bitch just jumped on a... I don't know if that's a shark or a whale shark. Yo, this bitch really jumped on that shit, yo. A wild ass animal. This motherfucker jumped on that bitch like a horse. Yeah, he couldn't get the first one. The first one, he thought that one was coming close. He was like, nah, I can't make it. This bitch really gonna jump on that shit, though. Yo, motherfuckers be crazy, bro. Damn, that's some crazy ass shit. Just know, I would never. My bad, guys.
against which all actions are measured. He is, by nature, loving, generous, faithful, kind, and so forth. Thus, if God exists, objective moral values exist, wholly independent of human beings. Second, theism provides a sound foundation for objective moral duties. On a theistic view, objective moral duties are constituted by God's commands. God's moral nature is expressed in relation to us in the form of divine commandments, which constitute our moral duties or obligations. Far from being arbitrary, God's commandments must be consistent with his holy and loving nature. Our duties, then, are constituted by God's commandments, and these, in turn, reflect his essential character. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, the whole moral duty of man can be summed up in the two great commandments. First, you shall love the Lord your God with all your strength, and with all your soul, and with all your heart, and with all your mind. And second, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. On this foundation, we can affirm the objective rightness of love, generosity, self-sacrifice, and equality, and condemn as objectively wrong selfishness, hatred, abuse, discrimination, and oppression. In summary, then, theism has the resources for a sound foundation for morality. It grounds both objective moral values and objective moral duties. And hence, I think it's evident that if God exists, we have a sound foundation for objective moral values and duties. Let's turn then to my second contention, that if God does not exist, then we do not have a sound foundation for objective moral values and duties. First, the question of objective moral values. If God does not exist, then what basis remains for the existence of objective moral values? In particular, why think that human beings would have objective moral worth? On the atheistic view, human beings are just accidental byproducts of nature, which have evolved relatively recently on an infinitesimal speck of dust called the planet Earth, and which are doomed to perish individually and collectively in a relatively short time. On atheism, it's hard to see any reason to think that human well-being is objectively good, any more than insect well-being or rat well-being or hyena well-being. This is what Dr. Harris calls the value problem. The purpose of Dr. Harris's book, The Moral Landscape, is to explain the basis on atheism of the existence of objective moral values. He explicitly rejects the view that moral values are Platonic objects existing independent of the world. So, his only recourse is to try to ground moral values in the natural world. But how can you do that, since nature in and of itself is just morally neutral? On a naturalistic view, moral values are just the behavioral byproducts of biological evolution and social conditioning. Just as a troop of baboons exhibit cooperative and even self-sacrificial behavior because natural selection has determined it to be advantageous in the struggle for survival, so their primate cousins, Homo sapiens, have evolved a sort of herd morality for precisely the same reasons. As a result of socio-biological pressures, there has evolved among Homo sapiens a sort of herd morality which functions well in the perpetuation of our species. But on the atheistic view, there doesn't seem to be anything that makes this morality objectively binding and true. The philosopher of science, Michael Ruse, reports, the position of the modern evolutionist is that humans have an awareness of morality because such an awareness is of biological worth. Morality is a biological adaptation, no less than our hands and feet and teeth. Considered as a rationally justifiable set of claims about an objective something, ethics is illusory. I appreciate that when somebody says, love thy neighbor as thyself, they think they are referring above and beyond themselves. Nevertheless, such reference is truly without foundation. Morality is just an aid to survival and reproduction, and any deeper meaning is illusory. If we were to rewind the film of human evolution and start anew, people with a very different set of moral values might well have evolved. As Darwin himself wrote in The Descent of Man, if men were reared under precisely the same conditions as hive bees, there can hardly be a doubt that our unmarried females would, like the worker bees, think it a sacred duty to kill their brothers, and mothers would strive to kill their fertile daughters, and no one would think of interfering. For us to think that human beings are special and our morality is objectively true is to succumb to the temptation to speciesism, that is to say, an unjustified bias in favor of one's own species. If there is no God, then any reason for regarding the herd morality evolved by Homo sapiens on this planet as objectively true seems to have been removed. Take God out of the picture, and all you seem to be left with is an ape-like creature on a speck of dust beset with delusions of moral grandeur. Richard Dawkins' assessment of human worth may be depressing, but why, on atheism, is he mistaken when he says there is at bottom no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pointless indifference? We are machines for propagating DNA. It is every living object's sole reason for being. So how does Sam Harris propose to solve the value problem? The trick he proposes is simply to redefine what he means by good and evil in non-moral terms. He says we should define good as that which supports the well-being of conscious creatures. So, he says, questions about values are really questions about the well-being of conscious creatures. And therefore, he concludes, it makes no sense to ask whether maximizing well-being is good. Why not? Because he's redefined the word good to mean the well-being of conscious creatures. So, to ask, why is maximizing creatures' well-being good, is on his definition the same as asking, why does maximizing creatures' well-being maximize creatures' well-being? It's just a tautology. It's just talking in circles. So Dr. Harris has, quote-unquote, solved the value problem just by redefining his terms. It's nothing but wordplay. At the end of the day, Dr. Harris isn't really talking about moral values at all. He's just talking about what's conducive to the flourishing of sentient life on this planet. Seen in this light, his claim that science can tell us a great deal about what contributes to human flourishing is hardly controversial. Of course it can, just as it can tell us what is conducive to the flourishing of corn, or mosquitoes, or bacteria. His so-called moral landscape, which features the highs and lows of human flourishing, isn't really a moral landscape at all. Thus, Dr. Harris has failed to solve the value problem. He hasn't provided any justification or explanation for why, on atheism, moral values would objectively exist at all. His so-called solution is just a semantical trick of an arbitrary and idiosyncratic redefinition of the terms good and evil in non-moral vocabulary. Second question, does atheism provide a sound foundation for objective moral duties? Duty has to do with moral obligation or prohibition, what I ought or ought not to do. Here, the reviewers of the moral landscape have been merciless in pounding Dr. Harris's attempt to provide a naturalistic account of moral obligation. Two problems stand out. First, natural science tells us only what is, not what ought to be the case. As philosopher Jerry Fodor has written, science is about facts, not norms. It might tell us how we are, but it wouldn't tell us what is wrong with how we are. In particular, it cannot tell us that we have a moral obligation to take actions which are conducive to human flourishing. So, if there is no God, what foundation remains for objective moral duties? On the naturalistic view, human beings are just animals, and animals have no moral obligations to one another. When a lion kills a zebra, it kills the zebra, but it doesn't murder the zebra. When a great white shark forcibly copulates with a female, it forcibly copulates with her, but it doesn't rape her. For none of these actions is forbidden or obligatory. There is no moral dimension to these actions. So if God does not exist, why think we have any moral obligations to do anything? Who or what imposes these obligations upon us? Where did they come from? It's very hard to see why they would be anything more than a subjective impression ingrained into us by societal and parental conditioning. On the atheistic view, certain actions such as rape and incest may not be biologically and socially advantageous, and so in the course of human development have become taboo, that is, socially unacceptable behavior. But that does absolutely nothing to prove that such acts are really wrong. Such behavior goes on all the time in the animal kingdom. On the atheistic view, the rapist who chooses to flout the herd morality is doing nothing more serious than acting unfashionably, the moral equivalent, if you will, of Lady Gaga. If there is no moral lawgiver, then there is no objective moral law. And if there is no objective moral law, then we have no objective moral duties. Thus, Dr. Harris's view lacks any source for objective moral duty. Second problem, ought implies can. A person is not morally responsible for an action which he is unable to avoid. For example, if somebody shoves you into another person, you're not responsible for bumping into him. You had no choice. But Sam Harris believes that all of our actions are causally determined and that there is no free will. Dr. Harris rejects not only libertarian accounts of free will, but also compatibilistic accounts of freedom. But if there is no free will, then no one is morally responsible for anything. In the end, Dr. Harris admits this, though it's tucked away in the endnotes of his volume. Moral responsibility, he says, and I quote, is a social construct, not an objective reality. I quote, in neuroscientific terms, no person is more or less responsible than any other for the actions they perform. His thoroughgoing determinism spells the end of any hope or possibility of objective moral duties, because on his worldview, we have no control over what we do. Thus, on Dr. Harris's view, there is no source of objective moral duties, because there is no moral lawgiver, and no possibility of objective moral duty, because there is no free will. Therefore, on his view, despite his protestations to the contrary, right and wrong do not really exist. Thus, Dr. Harris's naturalistic view fails to provide a sound foundation for objective moral values and duties. Hence, if God does not exist, we do not have a sound foundation for morality, which is my second contention. In conclusion, then, we've seen that if God exists, we have a sound foundation for objective moral values and objective moral duties. But that if God does not exist, then we do not have a sound foundation for objective moral values and duties. Dr. Harris's atheism thus sits very ill with his ethical theory. What I'm offering Dr. Harris tonight is not a new set of moral values. I think by and large we share the same applied ethics. Rather, what I'm offering is a sound foundation for the objective moral values and duties that we both hold dear. Thank you very much.
Dr. Harris now has 20 minutes. Timekeeper, are you ready? Begin.
Well, first let me say it's an honor to be here at Notre Dame. I'm very happy to be debating with Dr. Craig, the one Christian apologist who seems to put the fear of God into many of my fellow atheists. I've actually gotten more than a few emails this week that more or less read, "Brother, please don't blow this." So you will be the judge. Now, as many of you know, I've spent a fair amount of time criticizing religion. And one of the perks of this job is that you immediately hear from all the people who think that criticizing religion is a terrible thing to do. And strangely, the reason people rise to the defense of God is not that there's so much evidence that God exists, but that they believe that belief in God is the only intellectual framework for an objective morality. Clearly, Dr. Craig is among their number. Now, the sense is that without the conviction that moral truths exist, that words like right and wrong and good and evil actually mean something, humanity will just lose its way. That's the fear, and I actually share that fear. I've come to believe that this concern that many religious people have of the erosion of secular morality is not an entirely empty one. Now, I once spoke at an academic meeting on these themes, and I said, as I will say tonight, that once we understand morality in terms of human well-being, we'll be able to make strong claims about which behaviors and ways of life are good for us and which aren't. And I cited as an example the sadism and misogyny of the Taliban as an example of a worldview that was less than perfectly conducive to human flourishing. And it turns out that to denigrate the Taliban at a scientific meeting is to court controversy. And after my remarks, I fell into debate with another invited speaker, and this is more or less exactly how our conversation went. She said, "How could you ever say that forcing women to wear burqas is wrong from the point of view of science?" I said, well, because I think it's pretty clear that right and wrong relate to human well-being, and it's just as clear that forcing half the population to live in cloth bags and beating them or killing them when they try to get out is not a way of maximizing human well-being. And she said, well, that's just your opinion. And I said, okay, well, let's make it even easier. Let's say we found a culture that was literally removing the eyeballs of every third child, okay, at birth. Would you then agree that we have found a culture that was not perfectly maximizing human well-being? And she said it would depend on why they were doing it. So after my eyebrows returned from the back of my head, I said, okay, well, let's say they're doing it for religious reasons. Let's say they have a scripture which says every third should walk in darkness, or some such nonsense. And then she said, well, then you could never say that they were wrong. Okay, and so you should know, I was talking to someone who has a deep background in science and philosophy. She's actually since been appointed to the President's Council on Bioethics. She's one of 13 people advising President Obama on all of the ethical implications of advances in medicine and related science and technology. And she had just delivered a perfectly lucid lecture on the moral implications of neuroscience for the courts. And she was especially concerned that we could be subjecting captured terrorists to lie detection neuroimaging technology. And she viewed this as really an unconscionable violation of cognitive liberty. So on the one hand, her moral scruples were very finely calibrated to recoil from the slightest perceived misstep in ethical terms in our war on terror. And yet she was quite willing to forgive some primitive culture its fondness for removing the eyeballs of children in its religious rituals. And she seemed to be quite terrifyingly detached from the very real suffering of millions of women in Afghanistan at this moment. So I see this double standard as a problem. And strangely, this is precisely the erosion of basic common sense that many religious people are worried about. I hope it'll be clear to you at the end of this hour that religion is not an answer to this problem. Belief in God is not only unnecessary for a universal morality, it is itself a source of moral blindness. Now, it's widely believed that there are two quantities in this universe. There are facts on the one hand, and of course science can give us our most rigorous discussion of these. But then there are values, which many people like Dr. Craig think science can't touch. Okay, questions of meaning and morality and what life is good for. Now, of course, everyone thinks that science can help us get what we value, okay, but it can never tell us what we ought to value. And therefore, it cannot, in principle, be applied to the most important questions in human life. Questions like how we should raise our children, or what constitutes a good life. Now, it's thought, from the point of view of science, and Dr. Craig just gave voice to this opinion, that when we look at the universe, all we see are patterns of events. Just one thing follows another. And there's no corner of the universe that declares certain of its events to be good or evil, or right or wrong. Apart from us, I mean, our minds, we declare certain events to be better than others. But in doing that, it seems that we're merely projecting our own preferences and desires onto a reality that is intrinsically value-free. And where do our notions of right and wrong come from? Well, clearly they've been drummed into us by evolution, the product of these apish urges and social emotions. And then they get modulated by culture. You take sexual jealousy, for instance. And this is an attitude that has been bred into us over millions of years. Okay, our ancestors were highly covetous of one another, despite the fact that everyone was covered with hair and had terrible teeth. And this possessiveness now gets enshrined in various cultural institutions, like the institution of marriage. Okay, so therefore, a statement like, it's wrong to cheat on one's spouse, it seems a mere summation of these contingencies. It seems like it's an improvisation on the back of biology. It seems that from the point of view of science, it can't really be wrong to cheat on your spouse. And this is just how apes like ourselves worry when we learn to worry with words. Okay, now here is where religious people, like Dr. Craig, begin to get a little queasy, as I think they should. And many see no alternative but to insert the God of Abraham, an Iron Age God of war, into the clockwork as an invisible arbiter of moral truth. It is wrong to cheat on your spouse because Yahweh deems that it is so. Which is curious, because in other moods, Yahweh is perfectly fond of genocide and slavery and human sacrifice. I must say, it's pretty amusing to hear Dr. Craig in his opening remarks say that I'm merely focused on the flourishing of sentient creatures on this planet. Okay, if that's a sin, I'll take it. Okay, one wonders what Dr. Craig is focused on. Now, incidentally, you should not trust Dr. Craig's reading of me. Half the quotes he provided from me, as though I wrote them, were quotes from people I was quoting in my book, and often to different effects. So you'll have to read the book. Now, in claiming that values reduce to the well-being of conscious creatures, as I will, I'm introducing two concepts, consciousness and well-being. Now, let's start with consciousness. This is not an arbitrary starting point. Imagine a universe devoid of the possibility of consciousness. Imagine a universe entirely constituted of rocks. Okay, there's clearly no happiness or suffering in this universe. There's no good or evil. Value judgments don't apply. For changes in the universe to matter, they have to matter, at least potentially, to some conscious system. Okay, what about well-being? Well, the well-being of conscious creatures and the link between that and morality may seem open to doubt, but it shouldn't. But here's the only assumption you have to make. Imagine a universe in which every conscious creature suffers as much as it possibly can for as long as it can. Okay, I call this the worst possible misery for everyone. The worst possible misery for everyone is bad. If the word bad applies anywhere, it applies here. Now, if you think the worst possible misery for everyone isn't bad, or maybe it has a silver lining, or maybe there's something worse, I don't know what you're talking about. And what's more, I'm pretty sure you don't know what you're talking about either. What I'm saying is that the minimum standard of moral goodness is to avoid the worst possible misery for everyone. If we should do anything in this universe, if we ought to do anything, if we have a moral duty to do anything, it's to avoid the worst possible misery for everyone. And the moment you admit this, you admit that all other states of the universe are better than the worst possible misery for everyone. You have the worst possible misery for everyone over here, and all these other constellations of experiences arrayed out here. And because the experience of conscious creatures is dependent in some way on the laws of nature, there will be right and wrong ways to move along this continuum. It will be possible to think you're avoiding the worst possible misery for everyone and to fail. You can be wrong in your beliefs about how to navigate this space. So here's my argument for moral truth in the context of science. Questions of right and wrong and good and evil depend upon minds, and they depend upon the possibility of experience. Minds are natural phenomena. They depend upon the laws of nature in some way. Morality and human values, therefore, can be understood through science because in talking about these things, we are talking about all of the facts that influence the well-being of conscious creatures. In our case, we're talking about genetics and neurobiology and psychology and sociology and economics. Now, I view this space of all possible experience as a kind of moral landscape with peaks that correspond to the heights of well-being and valleys that correspond to the lowest suffering. And the first thing to realize is that there may be many equivalent peaks in this space. There may be many different but morally equivalent ways for human beings to thrive. But there will be many more ways not to thrive. There will be many more ways to fail to be on a peak. There are clearly more ways to suffer unnecessarily in this world than to be sublimely happy. Now, the Taliban are still my favorite example of a culture that is struggling mightily to build a society that is clearly less good than many other societies on offer. The average lifespan, they have a 12% literacy rate. They have the highest and maternal mortality in the world, and almost the highest fertility. So this is one of the best places on earth to watch women and infants die. It's perfectly obvious that the best response to this dire situation, which is to say the most moral response, is not to throw battery acid in the faces of little girls for the crime of learning to read. Now, of course, this is common sense to us, unless you happen to be a bioethicist on the President's Commission at this moment. But I'm saying, at bottom, these are also truths about biology and neurology and psychology and sociology and economics. It is not unscientific to say that the Taliban are wrong about morality. That the moment we notice that we know anything at all about human well-being, we have to say this. Now, some people with a little philosophical training may be tempted to say, well, what if a father wants to burn off his daughter's face with battery acid? And who are you to say that he's not as moral as we are? What if he has an alternate conception of well-being that's just as legitimate? Or who's to say that we should care about the well-being of little girls? This is the kind of email I get, incidentally. Now, moral skeptics of this kind, and Dr. Craig has essentially endorsed this position in a way, without a doubt, think that the only way to judge one person's values to be wrong are with respect to another person's values, and all such judgments have to be on a par. This is not true. That there are many ways for my values to be objectively wrong. They can be wrong with respect to deeper values that I hold, They can be wrong with respect to deeper values that I would hold if I were only a deeper person. It's clearly possible to value things that will reliably make you miserable in this life. It's clearly possible to be cognitively and emotionally closed to experiences that you would want if you were only intelligent and knowledgeable enough to want them. It is possible not to know what one is missing in life. So things can be right or wrong, or good or evil, quite independent of a person's opinions. Now, some of you might worry that I haven't defined well-being enough. How can something this loose as a concept be the benchmark of objective values? Well, consider by analogy the concept of physical health. Physical health is very difficult to define. You know, it used to be that if you were healthy, you could expect to live to the ripe old age of 40. And now our lifespan, our life expectancy has doubled in the last 150 years. What does health mean? Okay, well, it has something to do with not always vomiting, and not being in excruciating pain, not running a fever. Okay, but how fast should a healthy person be able to run? That question might not have an answer. But this does not make the question of health vacuous. It doesn't make it merely a matter of opinion or of cultural construction. The distinction between a healthy person and a dead one is about as clear and consequential as any we ever make in science. And notice that no one is ever tempted to attack the philosophical underpinnings of medicine with questions like, well, who are you to say that not always vomiting is healthy? What if you meet someone who wants to vomit, and he wants to vomit until he dies? Okay, how could you argue that he is not as healthy as you are? In talking about morality and human values, I think we really are talking about mental health and the health of societies. And the truth is, science has always been in the values business. We simply cannot speak of facts without resorting to values. We consider the simplest statement of scientific fact. Water is 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen. This seems as value-free an utterance as human beings ever make. But what do we do when someone doubts the truth of this proposition? All we can do is appeal to scientific values, the value of understanding the world, the value of evidence, the value of logical consistency. What if someone says, well, that's not how I choose to think about water. Okay, I'm a biblical chemist, and I read in Genesis 1 that God created water before he created light. So I take that to mean that there were no stars. So there were no stars to fuse helium and hydrogen into heavier elements like oxygen. Therefore, there was no oxygen to put in the water. So either water has no oxygen, or God created special oxygen to put in the water. But I don't think he would do that because that would be biblically inelegant. Okay, what can we say to such a person? All we can do is appeal to scientific values. And if he doesn't share those values, the conversation is over. If someone doesn't value evidence, what evidence are you going to provide to prove that they should value it? If someone doesn't value logic, what logical argument could you provide to show the importance of logic? Okay, so I think this split between facts and values should look really strange to you on its face. And what are we really saying when we say that science can't be applied to the most important questions in human life? Okay, we're saying that when we get our biases out of the way, when we most fully rely on clear reasoning and honest observation, when intellectual honesty is at its zenith, well, then those efforts have no application whatsoever to the most important questions in human life. But that is precisely the mood you cannot be in to answer the most important questions in human life. It would be very strange if that were so.
Professor Craig now has 12 minutes for rebuttal. Timekeeper, are you ready? Begin.
You'll recall in my first speech that I said I was going to defend 2 basic contentions tonight. First, that if God exists, then we have a sound foundation for objective moral values and duties. First, I explained that if God exists, then objective moral values are grounded in the character of God himself, who is essentially compassionate, fair, kind, generous, and so forth. Here, Dr. Harris didn't have anything by way of disagreement to say, but I do want to clear up a possible confusion. He represented this by saying that if religion were not true, then words like good and evil, right and wrong would have no meaning. I'm not maintaining that. That is to confuse moral ontology with moral semantics. Moral ontology asks, what is the foundation of objective moral values and duties? Moral semantics asks, what is the meaning of moral terms? And I am not making any kind of semantical claim tonight that good means something like commanded by God. Rather, my concern is moral ontology. What is the ground or the foundation of moral values and duties? To give an illustration, think of light. Light is a certain visible range of the electromagnetic spectrum. But obviously that isn't the meaning of the word light. People knew how to use the word light long before they discovered its physical nature. And I might also add, they certainly knew the difference between light and darkness long before they understood the physics of light. Now, in exactly the same way, we can know the meaning of moral terms like good and evil, right and wrong, and know the difference between good and evil without being aware that the good is grounded in God ontologically. So that is the position I'm defending tonight, is that moral values are grounded ontologically in God. Second, our moral duties are grounded by God's commandments, which are necessary reflections of his nature. Here, the only response I detected from Dr. Harris was to refer to the atrocities in the Hebrew Bible. But I think this is quite irrelevant to tonight's discussion. There are plenty of divine command theorists who are not Jews or Christians and place no stock whatsoever in the Bible. So this isn't an objection to divine command theory that I'm defending tonight. Now, if you are interested in biblical ethics, I want to highly recommend Paul Copan's new book, Is God a Moral Monster?, which examines those passages in the Hebrew Bible in light of the ancient Near East, and I can guarantee you it will be a very enlightening and interesting read. But this issue is strictly irrelevant in tonight's debate. So, we've not heard any objection to a theistic grounding for ethics. If God does exist, it's clear, I think, obvious even, that we have a sound foundation for objective moral values and duties. Now, what if God does not exist? Is there a sound foundation, first of all, for objective moral values? Now here, Dr. Harris said you don't need religion in order to have universal morality. Again, that's a confusion. Of course you don't. Remember, the Nazis, for example, could have won World War II and established a universal morality. The issue isn't universality. The issue is objectivity. And I'm maintaining that in the absence of God, there isn't any reason, any explanation for the existence of objective moral values. Now, Dr. Harris says, but we can imagine creatures being in the worst possible misery, and it's obviously better for creatures to be flourishing. The well-being of conscious creatures is good. Well, of course it is. That's not the question. We agree that all things being equal, flourishing of conscious creatures is good. The question is rather, if atheism were true, what would make the flourishing of conscious creatures objectively good? Conscious creatures might like to flourish, but there's no reason on atheism to think that it would really be objectively good. Now here, Dr. Harris, I think, is guilty of misusing terms like good and bad, right and wrong, in equivocal ways. He will often use them in non-moral senses. For example, he'll say there are objectively good and bad moves in chess. Now that's clearly not a moral use of the terms good and bad. You just mean they're not apt to win or produce a winning strategy. It's not evil what you've done. And similarly, in ordinary English, we use the words good and bad in a number of non-moral ways. For example, we say Notre Dame has a good team. Now, we can hope it's an ethical team, but that's not what's indicated by the win-loss record. That is a different meaning of good. Or we say that's a good way to get yourself killed, or that's a good game plan, or the sunshine felt good, or that's a good route to East Lansing, or there's no good reason to do that, or she's in good health. All of these are non-moral uses of the word good. And Dr. Harris's contrast of the good life and the bad life is not an ethical contrast between a morally good life and an evil life. It's a contrast between a pleasurable life and a miserable life. And there's no reason to identify pleasure, misery with good and evil, especially on atheism. So there's just no reason that's been given on atheism for thinking the flourishing of conscious creatures is objectively good. But Dr. Harris has to defend an even more radical claim than that. He claims that the property of being good is identical with the property of creaturely flourishing. And he's not offered any defense of this radical identity claim. In fact, I think we have a knockdown argument against it. Now, bear with me here. This is a little technical. On the next to last page of his book, Dr. Harris makes the telling admission that if people like rapists, liars, and thieves could be just as happy as good people, then his moral landscape would no longer be a moral landscape. Rather, it would just be a continuum of well-being whose peaks are occupied by good and bad people or evil people alike. Now, what's interesting about this is that earlier in the book, Dr. Harris explained that about 3 million Americans are psychopathic. That is to say, they care about the mental states of others. They enjoy inflicting pain on other people. But that implies that there's a possible world which we can conceive in which the continuum of human well-being is not a moral landscape. The peaks of well-being could be occupied by evil people. But that entails that in the actual world, the continuum of well-being and the moral landscape are not identical either. For identity is a necessary relation. There is no possible world in which some entity A is not identical to A. So if there's any possible world in which A is not identical to B, then it follows that A is not in fact identical to B. Now, since it's possible that human well-being and moral goodness are not identical, it follows necessarily that human well-being and goodness are not the same as Dr. Harris has asserted in his book. Now, it's not often in philosophy that you get a knockdown argument against a position, but I think we've got one here by granting that it's possible that the continuum of well-being is not identical to the moral landscape. Dr. Harris's view becomes logically incoherent. And all of this goes to underline my fundamental point that on atheism, there's just no reason to identify the well-being of conscious creatures with moral goodness. Atheism cannot explain the reality, the objective reality of moral values. What about objective moral duties? I first argued from the is-ought distinction that there is no basis on atheism for thinking that we have any moral duties. And here Dr. Harris says, if we have a moral duty to do anything, we have a duty to avoid the worst possible misery. But the question is the antecedent of that conditional. If we have a moral duty to do anything, what I'm arguing is that on atheism, I don't see any reason to think we have any moral duty to do anything. Moral obligations or prohibitions arise in response to imperatives from a competent authority. For example, if a policeman tells you to pull over, then because of his authority, who he is, you are legally obligated to pull over. But if some random stranger tells you to pull over, you're not legally obligated to do so. Now, in the absence of God, what authority is there to issue moral commands or prohibitions? There is none on atheism. And therefore, there are no moral imperatives for us to obey. In the absence of God, there just isn't any
sort of moral obligation of prohibition that characterizes our lives. In particular, we're not morally obligated to promote the flourishing of conscious creatures. So this is-ought distinction seems to me to be one that's fatal to Dr. Harris's position and has been widely recognized as such by reviewers of the moral landscape. But secondly, the problem that's even worse is the ought implies can problem. In the absence of the ability to do otherwise, there is no moral responsibility. In the absence of freedom of the will, we are just puppets or electrochemical machines. And puppets do not have moral responsibilities. Machines are not moral obligations. But on Dr. Harris's view, there is no freedom of the will, either in a libertarian or a compatibilistic sense, and therefore there is no moral responsibility. So there isn't even the possibility of moral duty on his view. So while I can affirm and applaud Dr. Harris's affirmation of the objectivity of moral values and moral duties, at the end of the day, his philosophical worldview just doesn't ground these entities that we both want to affirm. If God exists, then we clearly have a sound foundation for objective moral values and moral duties. But if God does not exist, that is, if atheism is true, then there is no basis for the affirmation of objective moral values, and there is no ground for objective moral duties, because there is no moral lawgiver, and there is no freedom of the will. And therefore, it seems to me that atheism is simply bereft of the adequate ontological foundations to establish the moral life.
Dr. Harris now has 12 minutes. Timekeeper, are you ready? Again.
Well, that was all very interesting. Ask yourselves, what is wrong with spending eternity in hell? Well, I'm told it's rather hot there, for one. Dr. Craig is not offering an alternative view of morality. Okay, the whole point of Christianity, or so it is imagined, is to safeguard the eternal well-being of human souls. Now, happily, there's absolutely no evidence that the Christian hell exists. And I think we should look at the consequences of believing in this framework, this theistic framework, in this world, and what these moral underpinnings actually would be. 9 million children die every year before they reach the age of 5. Picture an Asian tsunami of the sort we saw in 2004 that killed 250,000 people. One of those every 10 days, killing children only under 5. It's 24,000 children a day, 1,000 an hour, 17 or so a minute. That means before I can get to the end of this sentence, some few children, very likely, will have died in terror and agony